So my name is Joanna Kerr. I'm the outgoing Chief Executive of Actionaid International.
Okay, thank you, Joanna, for your time. So according to you, how do we build a stronger society? Okay, how do we build a stronger voice in a society that is slowly deconstructing in the values of human rights?
Yeah, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it? In a time, I think this is a very different time than even say 20 years ago, because people have selective access to information, and I think the media is in some ways manipulating people's public opinion around what is really happening in this country. And in many countries, inequality is actually growing because people are sticking to certain truths about what is the real problem, or what does leadership look like, or really the extent to which the problem is a particular leader or a set of social values. So I think we really need to get better at consciousness raising, right back to the basics. What is the structural cause of inequality, of violence, of patriarchy in this society? How is it that we truth tell in a very, very different way about the structural solutions? Right? We are being told that there are only very simple ways in which to maybe bring about a law, or bring about a shift in a particular policy. But as someone who's come out of the women's movement, we fought decades for all the right laws. We have amazing laws on violence against women, domestic violence, in just about every jurisdiction. But it truly is not changing the lives of women, because attitudes and behaviors have not been transformed. So it's really going back to this consciousness raising. What are the values that we want to live by? And if we are, this is a country that has probably the most beautiful constitution on the planet. And yet, in terms of the way people internalize and live by those values, there's just such a huge discrepancy. Right? So it's, how do you build home peace? How do you build cultures of respect inside our households, inside our offices, inside our communities? And that actually can be quite conflict-ridden, those conversations, that new consciousness raising. It can be full of tension. But Mandela is probably the greatest, most forgiving leader that this planet has seen in the past probably millennium. We have so much to continue to learn from him in terms of how every single one of his interpersonal relationships had that integrity, and where he chose to tell truth to power.
Wow. Yeah. So so according to you, what are the signs of democracy when it's failing?
Well, I actually don't believe there is any country in the world that has a true democracy. Because in many ways we're told that democracy is when there's a well-functioning electoral party system and an electoral system, multi-party system and an electoral system. But true democracy is where your interests are somehow represented and addressed through a system of a political system of transformation. So it's very, very clear in this country that the majority of people, their rights are not being addressed, and their voices are not being heard by the elites, by those in power. And so that's very, very clear. But we're also seeing the clampdown on civil society, on social movements, on press freedom. These are very, very dangerous signs that do not create open societies, that do not create societies where citizens themselves can exercise their right to associate, their right to speak out, their right to hold governments to account. And South Africans have to watch very, very closely, because given that the ANC essentially holds the power, and there really isn't an opposition, a political party opposition per se, that really it's the media that is the true opposition in this country. And so as long as that media stays free and strong, particularly progressive media, to really bring out areas of corruption and lack of accountability, then there's hope. Then there's hope, and that absolutely needs to be protected. But I think in 10 years there's going to be many more political parties and much more diversity in terms of political expressions, and that will be good for this country. It will be good for the ANC. But right now, citizens need to hold on to that space of freedom of expression and freedom of association. Otherwise, it could be we could get into a very, very dangerous situation in this country.
So according to the elements that you have just described, talking of freedom of expression, human rights. So as the Actionaid here in South Africa, what message would you like to give to them?
Well, Actionaid South Africa has a phenomenal role to play. As many of the staff members are themselves coming out of social movements, human rights movements, farm workers movements, feminist movements, and gay and lesbian rights movements. And what Actionaid can play a real role in is trying to undo some of the fragmentation of those movements, to build a new consciousness around the potential to build new cultures of peace and human rights that are extremely respectful of the rights of women, of gays and lesbians, of most marginalized and excluded people. A message of hope, because this is a country that has the capacity to dream and to transform, and so that narrative is sits amongst us, and in fact, in terms of the ways in which social movements organize here, very, very powerful. So Actionaid South Africa can be playing a really critical role in bringing diverse voices together, social movements together, to be propositional, not just oppositional, but propositional, in terms of the new cultures, attitudes, and behaviors that all citizens need to aspire to. And then, of course, it's about holding leaders to account. And I don't just say government. It's really all leaders. It's the kind of business leaders. It's the kind of religious leaders. It's the kind of opinion leaders that need to really be held to account, to demonstrate, to show how they are going to ensure that South Africa lives its beautiful constitution.
And any thoughts here in Pretoria? Today we had a wonderful session this morning in today's assembly. What would you say touched you most? And when you go back to your country, what is it that you're taking with you that you have learned here in South Africa, especially in the assembly that was hosted this week?
Well, I've had the privilege of living in South Africa for 3 years, and it's I'm going to take back just such profound, positive memories of really working alongside people who are full of very positive values, very strong principles around justice and transparency and accountability. And I, being part of the assembly today, you can see the amount of diversity, you can feel the amount of passion, you can feel the amount of energy, that despite the fact that we're coming from over 50 countries together, there's such a common narrative, there's such a common purpose, and yet we're different ages, we're different backgrounds, we have often different perspectives, and yet the shared purpose around ending injustice, ending inequality, that recognizing that the solution requires diversity. Just like biodiversity, the more biodiverse a forest is, the much more likely it will survive a tornado or a flood or an earthquake. The more diverse we are, the stronger and more resilient we are. So just to be in this room with all of these nationals, ages, all this diversity, it is rare in so many organizations to have this level of diversity. So it's truly, truly inspiring. And I just wish Actionaid International every good wish in the future. And I will absolutely be a proud, ongoing supporter and donor for years to come.
So, thank you very much.
You're welcome.